Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and distill them into the most important insights, giving you a shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're diving into a topic that's really sparked significant debate and a lot of legal questions: the use of the Autopen by presidents. We're specifically focusing on the recent controversies surrounding former President Joe Biden's administration. We've got articles, legal opinions, reports, exploring both the history and the modern-day implications.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack what an Autopen actually is, trace its, well, surprisingly long history in the White House, and then really get into the legal and ethical firestorm that erupted around its use, especially for presidential pardons and other official documents, particularly in Biden's final months. We'll explore the claims from those who say these actions are, quote, void, and then look at the counter-arguments from legal scholars, which are pretty strong.
Okay. Let's unpack this for you. You might have seen the headlines about this device, especially, concerning the sheer volume of clemency decisions made. We're going to look at what the sources tell us about the facts, the arguments, and what it all really means for presidential authority and, well, public trust. So maybe to kick us off, for anyone wondering, what exactly is an Autopen? How's it different from just like a rubber stamp?
Yeah, good place to start. An Autopen is essentially a mechanical device. Think of it like a small robotic arm that holds a real pen. Could be a ballpoint, could be a permanent marker, anything really. And it replicates a person's actual signature.
So it looks handwritten.
It does. And that's the key difference from a stamp or a digital printout. It creates a physical signature that mimics the flow and nuances of the original. Modern ones are pretty sophisticated now. They can save signatures on smart cards or USB drives, even write whole letters for mass mailings.
Which explains why they're popular with, say, celebrities or lawmakers signing tons of stuff.
Exactly. High volume is where they really come in handy.
It's fascinating, though, how long this kind of technology, or the idea behind it, has been around in government. Can you walk us through some presidential history here?
Absolutely. It's not new to the White House at all. We're talking decades. Thomas Jefferson apparently used an early polygraph device that functions somewhat similarly for copying letters. But the modern Autopen post-WWII invention saw used by presidents like John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson. LBJ was even photographed with one, used it a lot for correspondence.
Okay, so correspondence makes sense, but when did it cross the line into signing official, legally binding documents?
That's the key moment. The big precedent was set in 2011 under Barack Obama. He used an Autopen to reauthorize the Patriot Act while he was physically in France.
Wow. Signing legislation from overseas with a machine.
Yeah, that was the first known time a president signed actual legislation that way. It definitely raised some eyebrows back then, too.
And this idea of delegating the physical act of signing even before Autopens, that has deeper roots, too, right?
Oh, much deeper. Back in the 1800s, it wasn't uncommon for the Secretary of State or someone designated to sign things like pardon warrants in the president's name. You could look at some of Abraham Lincoln's pardons, for example. And the signature doesn't always quite match his verified handwriting. It shows a long history of understanding that the authority is what matters, not necessarily the president's physical hand on the paper for every single document.
That's a really important historical context. Now, fast forward to the recent situation. Former President Donald Trump has weighed in pretty heavily. He stated he uses hand signatures for, quote, legally operational or binding documents, though he admitted using an Autopen for letters. But when it came to Biden using it for pardons, he called it disgraceful. Seems like he draws a line there.
He definitely drew a line, at least publicly. He framed it as inappropriate for something as significant as a pardon, emphasizing the need for a real signature for important actions.
Okay, so we have the history, the function. Let's get to the heart of the recent controversy. When did this Autopen use by Biden become what some called a scandal?
It really exploded in the news. During the final months of Biden's term, allegations started flying that he was using the Autopen frequently, not just for routine stuff, but for major official documents. Pardons and clemency decisions were front and center. Critics, especially Donald Trump and conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project, jumped on this. They argued it raised serious questions. Was Biden personally authorizing these? Was it staff making decisions?
Yeah.
And inevitably, it got linked to broader concerns about his cognitive health.
And the sheer number of these clemency actions is, well, it's pretty staggering when you look at the timeline. Can you break that down?
The numbers are quite striking. Sources report a total of 4,245 acts of clemency granted by Biden over his term. But here's the kicker. A whopping 96% of those happened right at the end, between October 2024 and January 2025, just a few months.
96%, wow.
Yeah. It included commuting sentences for almost 2,500 nonviolent drug offenders. And the Autopen was confirmed to be used on 25 specific pardon and clemency warrants during December 24 and January 25. And importantly, many of these weren't like individual case reviews. They involved huge batches of names falling into broad policy categories.
Like people sent to home confinement during COVID or reductions for certain drug sentences, things like that.
Exactly. And commuting death sentences, too. Large categories.
But it wasn't just those broad categories, was it? There were some very high-profile preemptive pardons signed by Autopen, too.
That's right. Preemptive meaning granted before any charges or convictions. People like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who faced calls for prosecution from some quarters. General Mark Milley, the former Joint Chiefs Chairman who had clashed publicly with Trump, he received one.
And perhaps most controversially, members of Biden's own family.
Yes. His brother James Biden, his sister Valerie Biden Owens, his sister-in-law Sarah Jones Biden, they were all granted preemptive pardons via Autopen.
Along with lawmakers who served on the January 6th committee. That's quite a list. How did the Biden administration or Biden himself respond to all this criticism?
President Biden pushed back hard. He stated very clearly, quote, "I made every single one of those decisions." He called suggestions otherwise ridiculous and false.
And his reasoning for using the Autopen?
Primarily the sheer volume of documents. He mentioned a whole lot of people involved in that final clemency push. He also stressed its legality, saying it is legal, and pointing out other presidents used it, including Trump.
He framed the accusations as politically motivated.
Yes, he called it a distraction and a GOP ploy to change the focus. He also took a shot at the previous administration, accusing them of having lied so consistently about almost everything they're doing.
There's an interesting footnote here, though, from the New York Times report. It suggested Biden approved the standards for these large batches of pardons, but maybe not every single name individually.
That's a crucial distinction that critics latched onto. Did he approve the policy, or did he review and approve each person benefiting from that policy? The Times report suggested more of the former for those large categorical grants.
Which feeds right into the concerns about who was really exercising the power.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from just the pen to the decision-making process itself.
Okay, so inevitably this ended up in the legal arena, or at least the arena of legal arguments. How did Trump and his allies try to legally challenge these Autopen actions?
Well, Trump himself was very direct. He declared the Autopen sign pardons void, vacant, and of no further force or effect. His argument was essentially that Biden did not know anything about them.
And he explicitly linked it to cognitive ability.
He did. He tied it directly to claims of Biden's cognitive decline, calling it part of an egregious cover-up scheme, and pointedly asking who wielded the executive power. He even ordered his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to investigate.
The Heritage Foundation's oversight project made similar arguments, didn't they?
Yes. They claimed the vast majority of official documents near the end used an Autopen. Their core legal argument was that constitutional powers, like the pardon power in Article 2, are vested solely in the president. They argued this requires his personal, affirmative approbation, his direct approval. They believe if his actions weren't truly his own, they're invalid. They even specifically rejected a key 2005 Justice Department opinion on this.
Okay, so that's the challenge. What about the counter-arguments from legal scholars and based on existing precedent? How strong is the case for the validity of Autopen's signatures?
It's generally seen as very strong by most legal experts. Constitutionally speaking, the argument is that Article 2, Section 2, which grants the pardon power, simply doesn't mention signing or signatures.
Unlike the part about bills becoming law.
Exactly. Article 1, Section 7 does require the president to sign bills. The pardon clause doesn't have that requirement. Some scholars even go so far as to say an oral pardon could theoretically be valid, but that's untested.
So the Constitution's silence is key. What about the Justice Department's own opinions over the years?
That's where the 2005 Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, memo comes in, the one Heritage rejected. Issued under the Bush administration, it concluded the president does not need to personally perform the physical act of affixing his signature to a bill. It said he can direct a subordinate to use an Autopen. But, crucially, it also said the president cannot delegate the decision to approve the bill. The act is delegable. The judgment is not.
And there's even older precedent.
Yeah. Going way back to 1929, an Office of the Solicitor General memo said a pardon document need not have the president's autograph. A facsimile signature, basically like an Autopen signature, certified by an official was deemed sufficient.
Have the courts weighed in recently?
Yes, significantly.
Yeah.
Just in 2024, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit ruled on a clemency case, stating nothing in the Constitution restricts the president's exercise of the clemency power to commutations that have been rendered through a documented writing. Essentially, the court suggested the lack of a personally signed document doesn't automatically invalidate the act.
Okay, so constitutionally, based on DOJ opinions, based on court rulings, it seems the use of the Autopen itself is on pretty solid legal ground. What about reversing the pardons themselves?
On that point, legal experts seem to be in, well, universal agreement, according to our sources. Pardons, once issued and accepted, are considered final and irrevocable.
They're irrevocable, meaning they just can't be taken back.
Correct. There's no established constitutional or legal mechanism for a subsequent president or anyone else to just declare them void. An old federal court ruling from 1869 stated presidents have no power to revoke a pardon once granted.
So what are the chances Trump's challenge, or any legal challenge, could actually succeed in overturning these pardons?
Most experts think the chances are extremely low. Constitutional scholar Jonathan Turley called them vanishingly low. He argued presidents are allowed to use autopens, and courts won't just assume some kind of conspiracy without strong evidence. Michael O'Neill from Landmark Legal Foundation did note it's somewhat uncharted legal territory that might need a Supreme Court ruling someday to fully clarify. But the overwhelming consensus is that these pardons will stand legally.
Okay, so if the legal ground is relatively solid, let's pivot to the ethical side, because that seems to be where the debate really catches fire. What's the core ethical question here?
It really boils down to this. Did the president personally know about and approve the specific documents being signed by the Autopen? It's less about the machine itself and more about the presidential intent and direct involvement behind it.
And this ties directly into those allegations about a cover-up or cognitive decline.
Precisely. Critics like Trump and his White House spokesperson, Harrison Fields, explicitly framed the Autopen use as part of an egregious cover-up scheme. The claim was it was used to mask Biden's alleged cognitive decline and raise doubts about who was in fact running the country. It became a proxy for those larger questions.
And there were specific incidents or actions that seemed to fuel these concerns.
There were. For instance, Biden's former White House physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, reportedly declined to answer certain questions from House Republicans, citing patient privacy and Fifth Amendment rights. House Oversight Chair James Comer saw this refusal as evidence of a conspiracy to cover up President Biden's cognitive decline. Whether that's a fair interpretation or not, it added fuel to the fire.
And I remember reading about House Speaker Mike Johnson recounting a meeting.
Yes, Speaker Johnson described leaving a meeting with Biden allegedly concerned because Biden reportedly didn't remember signing a major executive order shortly after doing so. Johnson was quoted saying, "I walked out of that meeting with fear and loathing because I thought we were in serious trouble. Who is running the country?" These kinds of anecdotes, reported by high-level officials, really amplified the concerns.
Beyond anecdotes, was there any concrete evidence about who specifically authorized the Autopen's use for those final controversial pardons?
There was. Emails obtained by the New York Times were quite revealing. They showed Biden's chief of staff at the time, Jeff Zients, giving the final go-ahead for using the Autopen for those preemptive pardons for Fauci and Milley on Biden's very last day in office. Zients wrote explicitly in an email, "I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of all of the following pardons."
So the chief of staff approved the use of the Autopen. Does that settle the question of whether Biden himself approved the pardons?
Not necessarily. It confirms Zients authorized the mechanism, but the core question remains whether Biden directed Zients to do so for those specific individuals. The email doesn't definitively answer that. Adding to the confusion, another report mentioned that a Biden staffer who physically operated the Autopen for some documents was apparently unaware of who had given the ultimate authorization.
That detail about the staffer does suggest potential communication gaps, or at least a lack of clarity down the chain of command.
It certainly raises questions. Caroline Leavitt, Trump's White House press secretary, posed the question directly. Was Biden's legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? She suggested that could imply illegal behavior by staff.
And this all feeds back into the bigger themes of transparency and public trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It touches on the public's right to feel confident that official actions, especially major ones like pardons, truly reflect the will and decision of the elected president. Harrison Fields argued that a president perceived as having misled the public on other issues like health or the economy shouldn't be trusted on this either. And Trump's view, again, was that using an Autopen for something this significant is just disgraceful, that people involved deserve the respect of a real signature.
So wrapping this up, what does this whole deep dive mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of presidential power and its limits? We've seen that using an autopen isn't new. It has decades of history, and legally, it seems pretty well established, mainly because the Constitution just doesn't specify how a president must execute many powers like pardoning.
Right. But what's so fascinating is how that legal reality crashes into these ethical questions, especially when you layer on concerns about a president's health or direct involvement. The conversation shifts really fast from, is it legal? To, okay, but is it right? Is it transparent? Who's actually accountable here? It throws a spotlight on the decision-making process at the very top.
Exactly. It gets complicated, doesn't it? Because even if the lawyers say it's fine, does that satisfy the public's expectation of personal accountability from their president? This Autopen controversy, while maybe legally settled for now, clearly became a flashpoint for much bigger political fights about executive authority, fitness for office, and ultimately, trust in government. It's just a perfect example of how even a simple machine, a tool, can ignite this huge debate when it touches the core functions of the presidency. So for you, the learner, the key insight here is that even when a government practice is technically legal and has precedent, its political and ethical dimensions can still stir up major controversy and force us to ask fundamental questions about how power should be wielded. And here's a final thought to leave you with. In our world that's becoming more and more digital, where we use virtual signatures and automated approvals all the time, how much does the physical act of a president putting pen to paper still matter? Does it affect public confidence, the perceived legitimacy of their actions? Especially for huge decisions like pardons that change people's lives forever. Something to think about.